All right, what's going on, guys? This is Steven. I'm the host of the Mass Class Strong. Blah, 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 blah. All right, let's try that again. What's going on, guys? This is Steven. I'm the host of the Mass Class podcast. Class is in session. Today, I got Hunter Pauley. Hunter is a registered dietitian. He just moved from Helena. I can't remember where he moved to, but he just got a sick new job. He's in his sick new apartment. And today we are going to talk all about what to do after a contest prep diet. So you got super lean, you got super shredded, you maybe won a plastic trophy, you maybe got yourself a little bit of an eating disorder. Now what? Now where's the next step? So Hunter, I'm going to throw you this question. What do we do after we are finished our contest prep? How do we return back to normal society?
Yeah. So first off, Stephen, thanks for having me on this. It's an amazing podcast. My brain is already experiencing hypertrophic gains right now. But yeah, like post contest. So this is something that not a lot of people honestly, not a lot of people talk about in general. Just what happens after that, those 6 months of getting ready for a contest prep. And I will say it has been a while since I've competed. Last time I did compete was in 2016. So, but after the stage is kind of like this weird, like dark and gray area of where you're trying to find a new goal because, you leave in contest prep of 6 months and that was your main focus and goal. And now you have nothing. Like you're trying to hold on to that physique that you just shredded down for 20 plus weeks or whatever. And you're in this position of where most likely you're hungry as fuck. Your libido is, down in the drain, like unbelievable amount.
Gummy worm gang.
Yes, 100%. So it's like, it's like, how do I get out of this position? And, there's a lot of research right now on like research diet, or not reverse dieting out of it, and the recovery diet. So personally, the main goal of post-contest prep is to get those hormones back to where they were prior, because that's going to put you into the best position for getting out of that shredded sick cunt status of having abs and everything. But kind of just going along with that is what else comes along with trying to get out of that position is getting into this really dark state of your mind where you're kind of lost. And I think not something a lot of people talk about post contest too is the depression that can set in. So, and I'm sure like you experienced that too, right, Stephen?
Yes,
kind
sir.
of exiting that show.
Yeah, I mean after I competed, I had a very I don't even think it's a unique experience, but what happened with me was I felt during my contest prep a lot of external pressures that were placed on me by friends, family, my teammates. I had a lot of pressure that I didn't really like. Now I look back on, and I don't think I really needed that pressure um, in the sense that it was my first show. I don't think putting an emphasis on doing well when it's someone's very first time out the gate probably isn't ideal, because then it becomes what happens if you didn't do well, right? What happens if you didn't do as well as you think you did? And so for me, I had a lot of people at my local gym like telling me I was going to win my class, telling me like I was going to win the overall, which like I clearly did not do, right? You could argue me a few places down in my opinion. So, but this constant like stress that I initially didn't have. I initially had the mindset of just I want to go in, dip my toe in, see what it's like, see what this whole thing is like, and then having this experience where I was told I was going to do so well, and all of a sudden there was an expectation where like, well, what happens if I don't do as well as as everyone thinks I'm going to do? I'm a failure. It didn't go that way, and so fast forward to the end of the show, I didn't do as well as the local gym bros forecasted me to do, right? And because of that, I kind of had, and also like all the hype leading up to a show, you know, like everyone is just there for you. They want you to do as well as you can, assuming you haven't completely alienated all your friends at this point. You know, you've got like all these people who have seen you like struggle and work your ass off for, you know, like you said, 20 plus weeks. And really ever since you started lifting, you just didn't know this is where you were going to be. And yeah, and then you have one day, one really exciting meal, and then you wake up the next day and it's like it never happened. And it's weird. And it's like this stillness, this quiet. And you were working so hard for this goal, and then all of a sudden it's gone. It's over, you know? And it's like how you hear stories of like Olympic athletes getting depression after the Olympics because there was all this excitement and this massive buildup of happiness, and then it's gone the next day. And so I think that really brought me into a place where, you know, I used food as a way of coping with that. And that's probably one of the things that really brought along my binge eating problem that I struggled with for, you know, a year or so after that. I do want to ask you a question because you brought this up in your opening statement. Was what's your take on reverse dieting versus, you know, the 3DMJ copyright claimed recovery diet? What's your take? Do you think one is better? Or do you think it's individual?
So I definitely believe like the recovery diet of getting out of that, basically that hole as quickly as you can, because, you know, Lane is very big on that reverse dieting of slowly increasing calories. And I feel like there is, for a certain population, there is a point where you want to reverse diet out. Being at the end of a contest prep, I don't feel like that is an appropriate area to do a reverse diet. Plus, to do a proper reverse diet after a show is extremely fucking difficult. Like, I mean, if you're talking about doing a reverse diet correctly, it's adding maybe 50 calories or whatever per week. And when you're coming off of a diet, when you're like deep into contest prep, you know, depending on the individual, I got down to like 1900 to 2000, which was low. Like, to slowly increase by about 50 calories a week is extremely difficult, not only physically, but also mentally. Because like you had mentioned, you get into that state and you just start to use food as a I want to say tool, but like a tool to kind of fill that void, or, you know, that space that you no longer have of that, having that goal. And until you actually go through a contest prep and you experience the weeks and the months after that show, it's very hard to describe that feeling to someone of where you're full, your stomach cannot fit any more food, but mentally all you can think about is eating because your body's been in such a starved state. It's trying to find whatever it can to make sure you don't go back to that starved state. So
I 100% agree. Did you find that after your dieting process, that did you have any you know, food related issues? Obviously, I think 99% of people are at least going to be food focused after they're done. But did you have any disordered eating patterns or anything that came up from your contest prep?
oh yeah, I mean, probably I just didn't feel normal for at least probably 6 to 8 months, until my body finally started to stabilize. After that point, I was bloated like 24/7. My cravings just for food in general were unreal. Like, I remember I'd wake up and I'd be like, I'm going to really try to be really good today, and just like try to follow this like structured, like, even if it was like 25 or 3,000 calories, way above what I was on before, I just found myself like by noon, I was just so hungry still. And then it would just be from eating lunch. And then I would go into like having, you know, 2 pieces of toast with like cookie butter on it. And then it would go into a bowl of cereal after that. And it was just like day after day after day of that, you know? So I never felt normal, honestly, 6+ months afterwards. And thankfully I competed, early on in the spring and stuff. So going into summer, I was able to stay active after that. But it's a weird state of mind for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you be able to, just for anyone who, maybe is a little outside of the scientific sphere, would you be able to tell the difference or explain to us the difference between the recovery diet and a reverse diet strategy after you finish a contest prep?
Yeah, so my understanding of the two, the recovery diet is more adopted by 3DMJ, so Eric Helms, Jeff Alberts. And I'm sure everyone's going to be different, but with them specifically, they're kind of aimed at increasing calories at a quicker rate versus Lane Norton and his crew, which is kind of on that reverse dieting, where, like I mentioned, it's very, very slow of adding those calories in. So you're not, the goal with the reverse diet is to get calories above what you were before, while also limiting the amount of fat gain that you're going to have during that process. And just kind of going back to why I think the recovery diet is better is because the longer you're staying in that deficit and that hole, the longer your hormones are going to be, they're going to be lower. And that's going to limit your potential moving forward of, getting back to that homeostasis of where your body was before, and also priming and setting up your body for gaining more muscle in the future too.
Mm-hmm. So just to clarify, to make sure that I'm on the same page. So a reverse diet is intentionally slowly increasing calories. So like after the show is over, you go to your perceived maintenance calories, and then you're just slowly from there increasing by 50 or however many calories per week until you've like buffered your metabolism back up to a sufficient point. Is that correct? And then from there you're going to slowly increase, and or do you just keep increasing until you've kind of reached a level of like a surplus?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends too, because there's so much, especially in the last couple of years, like first all it was reverse, like let's just reverse diet. And then 3DMJ came out with the recovery diet, where it was kind of, it's kind of like, I guess you could describe the reverse diet as, maybe driving through town, like it's a lot slower to go through town. And then the recovery diet is like maybe hopping on the interstate of trying to get to a location instead. So you're still getting to from point A to point B in almost the same manner. But with the recovery diet, it's much quicker, whereas reverse is a lot slower, from my understanding, and from what I've heard other people describe it as too. Again, it's going to depend on how people, view both diets specifically, though.
Gotcha. So the apparent advantage of doing the recovery diet as opposed to doing a reverse diet is just that they're both eventually going to get you to that same body composition at some point. It's just the recovery diet is just going to get you there faster. So theoretically, at least to me, it seems like you're going to be spending less time in a state where your hormones are down, where you're even more food focused. I personally would find, at least I think for me, that if I had to continue to eat, even my relative maintenance at that time, probably would be around 2,000 to 2,300 calories at that point. It doesn't matter who you are. That is a piss poor amount of calories when you've been dieting for 4 to 6 months. It's irrelevant. Even if you are eating a ton of vegetables, tons of starchy carbs, it just does not do anything for you. And the other thing is, after you've dieted for that long, you just can't fill yourself up. Or you can fill yourself up where you feel full, like you were saying earlier, you always felt bloated, but it does not actually do anything for your satiety. Mm-hmm. It's like you can feel physically unwell, but still be ravenously hungry at the same time.
Yeah. And I feel like the people who want a reverse diet are also the ones that are going to be trying to hold on to that body composition that they have right now for as long as possible. And I was like, I was at that point, like I wanted to try to hold on to as much leanness as I could along the way. But the fact is like, I know that's not ideal down the road to be gaining muscle mass in the long run. Like I know I can't stay that lean, all year round. So going into like a recovery diet, I feel like that personally sets me up for a position of where, okay, I'm not going to maintain this leanness now. I'm not stepping on stage anymore. Now my main focus is how can I get better for next year and the next time I step on stage. Trying to stay lean, that's not being beneficial towards that goal at all.
Mm-hmm. So we often hear that there's a quote unquote healthy body fat range for men and women, and you can correct me if you disagree, but from my understanding, for men it's 10 to 15%. For women, it's add 7% to that on the ranges. And so is the point of both diets to get you back towards that healthy body fat percentage? Say around, for men 10%, for women 16 to 18%. That low end healthy range. And then from there, we're going to slow down the rate of gain for the recovery diet, and for reverse dieting, they would theoretically keep it the same rate of gain, or how would that work? What's the rate of gain at that point?
After a contest?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's going to vary, to be honest, though, too. Obviously, you're going to gain fat coming out of a contest prep. Like, whether you recovery diet, you reverse diet, you're going to gain fat regardless. I think the approach is just kind of getting your metabolism, your hormones and everything back to a state of where you can starting to adjust your diet at that point. So whether that's 6 to 12 months post show and you finally feel like you're mentally capable of, starting to track your food and starting to look at your portions and caloric intake again, then at that point you can say, okay, let's try to maybe figure out where my true maintenance is right now and go from there. That point, maybe you go into a slight deficit, lose a little bit of the body fat that you put on post show. And then you're kind of like in this position to prime yourself for that next massing phase too. So you're not just continuously going in a surplus all the way post show for the next 2-3 years, but instead you're going to kind of pull back a little bit, rediscover where your maintenance phase is, and then go from there.
Gotcha. So to another thing you touched on earlier that I'd really like to get your opinion on was when we were talking about one of the potential downsides to having, sorry, your camera cut out there and you were all like Shrek colored for a minute, so I like had to fix it real quick. But anyway, you were referring to people who at least lean towards the reverse dieting, maybe having the potential mindset of trying to stay lean year round, or those who favor trying to maintain a lower body fat. Do you think that's just because people are fat phobic? Do you think that's because people are just scared of the regain? I personally know people who have spent, they spent those 20 or 16 weeks or however long getting as lean as they possibly can. And then I can understand the mindset of being like, wait, that was all a waste of time because I've achieved this amazing package that I brought to stage. And now I can't even like live with it for more than a week, like trying to maintain that level of leanness for any period of time. Anyone who's done it will tell you it's awful. No one likes being sub 10% body fat except on Instagram. You know what I mean? So do you think that the whole idea of staying that lean tends to be like people who are scared to, like, I guess, embrace the bulk, embrace the mass?
Yeah. And I mean, it kind of circles back around to a body dysmorphia issue almost of, you know, when you're deep into prep like that, clothes just like, you look sick in clothes. Like people think, are you like, do you have cancer or something? And you're like, no, like I'm just fucking, I'm getting shredded.
You look like ill, like sickly,
Yeah.
not like you don't look sick, dude. You look like you're gonna like vomit and pass out on my floor. You know?
Yeah.
You know?
So it's like you feel like shit in clothes, and then when you take off your shirt and stuff, you're like, okay, this is better. But it's not. And it takes a long time for people to come to that conclusion of like, this is not sustainable. Like being that lean is not sustainable. You know, getting to a point where, you know, for me, like I felt like 10 weeks out, probably between 8 and 10 weeks out, that was like a point where I wasn't hyper focused so much on food yet. I still like I could, you know, still maintain my lifts in the gym and everything. But anything past that, like that leanness, I was like, this is the point of no return. You know, this is just not sustainable in terms of building muscle at that point.
I gotcha. So do you think a lot of I hear a lot of people talk about mindset, but I don't hear a lot of people talk about how you should change your mindset. And something that I've found beneficial to me as someone who has, you know, struggled with body image and body dysmorphia like quite a lot throughout my life is finding a change in mindset tends to really help me in those transitional periods. So a few months ago, I did a longer term cutting phase that didn't get me that lean. You know, I came down from a very hefty 230 to a respectable like 210. And I found that for me personally, focusing on like physical developments in my physique was really helpful to try to keep me motivated, to keep my willpower high when I was dieting. But something that helped me realize that continuously dieting wasn't going to make me look any better, like I wasn't going to be adding anything to my physique, was realizing that I need to mass in order to increase my performance, which is going to help me get bigger, stronger, more godlike in the future, which is like, you know, what we all aspire to be. So do you think changing that mindset and having more of a like a process driven mindset instead of an endpoint driven mindset, is that something that you think can help people, especially when they're dealing with things like body dysmorphia?
Yeah, and like you kind of mentioned, you shifted from that mindset of, you know, basically it's being okay with where you're at, but also I think back to when I first started, and I was, you know, first started in the gym and everything, and I thought the whole purpose of going to the gym was to eat less, like get just stupid shredded, like have abs and everything like that. But it never really clicked with me that I was actually limiting my progress in the gym because I was eating so little, and I was hyper focused on just right in my midsection. That's all I cared about. Like I didn't care about anything else. It was just like, as long as I can see some definition here, like I'm golden, you know? And I have yet to really meet one person that is not their main focus of like, I just want a six pack. That's all I want. Like I was 6'1", 155 pounds, and that's all I cared about. I was a twig, you know? So once I started to learn more about nutrition in general and just kind of like how nutrition could impact body composition, I got the mindset the very first time of like, fuck it, I'm just going to eat a lot of food and I didn't lift right. I lifted 7 days a week, which is stupid. But the fact that I just increased my food got me up almost like, you know, a lot of it was probably glycogen and stuff, but like 25 pounds. But I looked so much different versus when time I was barely eating any food. And being a noob, I kept a good amount of leanness still during that process. So whenever these beginners come to me or even ask questions like, yo, I'm like 6 foot, 170 pounds, but I want to cut. I'm like, dude, don't fucking cut.
Don't do it.
Use the newbie years to your advantage. And that's something like, if I could go back and like tell myself, like, I would be like, don't worry about body composition, like, you know, unless you're overweight a lot. But if you're just a lean, like average person, like just focus on lifting heavy, you know, getting some hypertrophy in and like a well-balanced diet in a small surplus, you're going to make a lot of fucking gains.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially in that beginner stage, don't realize like like if you do it wrong, you can mess this up, but how little fat you actually will gain if you put yourself in a light surplus, like when you're completely new to training. Like if you, excuse me, if you are pretty consistently, you know, 500 calorie surplus a day, maybe even less than that, you know, you're going to put so much more muscle than fat proportionally than any other time in your career, you know. And I wish that I had the understanding of food in general when I first started, because I just, you know, thought that if I just ate chicken, rice, and broccoli and egg whites, that I would just all of a sudden become massive. Like I was like, that's what all the pros are doing. That's what the big dude at my gym does. You know, like that's what I got to do. But the big dude at my gym was getting ready for a contest. So like, no shit, that's what he was doing, you know? And if I actually had a really interesting question given to me the other day, and it was, if you could go back in time and either give yourself advice on training or nutrition, what would you choose? And I'm really interested to see what you would say.
So I was someone that asked you that question.
Oh, wait, it was you? I was like, I definitely got this question the other day. That's hilarious.
I think back, I definitely, like, if I could go back and sit with myself, let's say for an hour or 30 minutes, and that's all I had, and I had to pick between nutrition and training, like by far, I would have discussed nutrition, just for the aspect of, I know how I ate back then, and it wasn't enough food. Like that's what I felt like really limited me. Even when I said, fuck it, I'm just gonna eat all this food, like all I ate was chicken breast and like white or brown rice. That's it. Like, so there was no like dietary fat in there. There was no like, you know, regard to like meal composition, like around training, post-training, all of that. There was none of that. So if I could go back and just be like, look, dude, just focus on these basic principles. Don't fuck with abs for like two plus years, you know. That's what I would go back. It would be nutrition 100%, because yeah, the training style I did was not right, but if I had fueled my body properly during that phase, it would have been night and day difference, 100%.
I totally agree with you. I think I said nutrition. Did I say nutrition?
Yeah, you did.
I think I'm going to change my answer only because I didn't fucking do legs. And I think I would just go back and smack myself around until I was like, cycling doesn't make your legs bigger. Stop being an idiot. You know what I mean? Like I just because like my nutrition was not ideal, but I was still, you know, from my sophomore year in high school to my freshman year in college, I still put on like 30 pounds or so. So I was in a surplus. It just, you know, could it have been better? Yeah. But at the same time, did I probably make better gains than most people in their noob years? Also, yeah, honestly, because I at least, when I started training, I was in boarding school and we had, you know, access to an all-you-can-eat buffet 4 times a day, you know, and I had food in my room. So there was not, I didn't go hungry a minute. So I was really in kind of the opposite situation that you were in, where I didn't know anything about nutrition. Like I didn't even know that like bodybuilders ate chicken and rice. I just, my body was like, you know, it's the perfect like post-workout thing, chocolate milk. So I would drink like 2 glasses of chocolate milk at every single meal I went to. We're talking like whole fat, like comes in a 6-gallon drum and they pour it in the milk machine, you know? And I mean, hey, it probably helped because, you know, I was getting some extra food in, but yeah, I would just, you know, and I didn't know any better, you know, and I don't think most people at that stage do. Um, that was a great tangent. I do want to come back to this idea of body dysmorphia that we were talking about, and how it is related to kind of the expectations that we put on ourselves and that society puts on to us. And like you said, you had this idea that you had to have abs in order to, in fact, why did you even feel you had to have abs? Like what made you feel that way?
So I think if you're a male, like everyone starts lifting weights to attract the opposite sex. So there's a lot of pressure. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of pressure from the outside that gets, and I'm not saying it doesn't get placed on females, like it's probably more on females, but guys hyper focus on just having that like shredded body to like impress the opposite sex, and in hopes of like reeling one in, you know? So I feel like that's where a lot of like in teenage boys, that's where a lot of that hyper focus comes from. It's just like, oh, like I'm gonna get shredded abs, and then like once I get shredded abs, all these girls are gonna come out of the cracks out of nowhere and just like they're gonna come for me. And it's like, in reality, you start attracting guys because they're like, oh, what are you doing, bro? Like, what's your diet like? What's your split?
Yeah.
So that's where, I mean, that's like simply that. That's why I started lifting weights, is because I was trying to attract the opposite sex.
Yeah, I feel like I had a pretty I guess I initially started doing some amount of like lifting. I did calisthenics at my house. Like my mom got me one of those over the door pull-up bars from Walmart. Mm-hmm. And you know, I would use that and do like chin-ups and pull-ups, and you know, I'd use it for dips and all this kind of stuff. And you know, at one point I was pretty good at pull-ups. You know, I could do like 30 or 40 dead hang pull-ups in a row pretty easily. Because that's all I had. I mean, also team no legs, like that helped a lot. Like there was just not much holding me down. And so I think that I actually didn't feel body dysmorphia for myself until I got to college, I think. No, maybe it was in high school. But I remember one of the summers in between one of my years of school, I went to sign up for a gym because I used to work out at Planet Fitness, which is not a gym. And I signed up for a gym, you know, a place with squat racks. And
that you never used.
Yeah. Yeah, but they needed to be there, you know? It was like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's got to have a squat rack. I'm not going to use it, but it needs to be there. And I remember going in and just, there's one local guy in my town who I never introduced myself to because I was just a shy kid, but I'm pretty sure he was a pro bodybuilder. He at least had the size to be a pro bodybuilder, even looking back now. And I remember seeing that, and I feel like people have two reactions. They're either, that's gross, I never want to look like that, or that's really cool, I want to look like that. That was me. But then I realized I ain't shit, and I ain't never gonna be shit. You know, and of course this was also before I even knew what steroids were. And I'm not accusing this guy, but he was like 5'8", 250. So like, and shredded, you know, and so I won't make any assumptions, but if I had to place a bet, and
probably just eating a lot of chicken, rice, and broccoli, man.
Yeah, I mean, I was, you know,
in there too.
I was 6'2", 180, you know, so I was killing it. But yeah, I mean, so I think initially seeing what I imagined and put on a pedestal as just an inhuman, unobtainable physique in person, and realizing that these people don't just exist in pumping iron, they exist like down the street from my house. You know, it it changed the way I looked at myself from being like, look at all this cool progress I'm making, to I started comparing myself to everyone else. And that's not a knock on anyone who's huge. You know, I would love to be you, but it was me not being able to rationalize that that's him and I'm me, and I don't like I can't derive all my self-worth from this one jacked dude at my local gym in Newburyport, Massachusetts. You know what I mean? And I don't know. Have you struggled with body dysmorphia? And have you ever thought of where, like, do you know, like, an instance? Did it ever spark for you? Because when I look back, that's like clearly my spark.
Yeah. So I think it's funny when you say that too, because I always remember, like, I don't know where I heard it from, but someone said, once you start lifting, you'll fall over.
Dom Mazzetti, the bro.
Yeah. So I heard that and I was like, man, this guy's right. Like, I mean, when I started lifting, I don't think I really had it yet because I didn't know. Like, I was just there to lift weights. But it was probably after, honestly, like a year or two of when I started to get a little bit bigger, lifting weights. And then you start to pay attention more to your surroundings in the gym. And like, that's when you start to become a little bit more hyper-focused on how you look at the gym, how you look without your shirt, you know, how you look in the mirror and all of that too. But something and I don't take claim for this too, but when you go into the gym, probably 90% of us, if you're a male too, it could be hot as hell outside. And if it's upper body day or lower body day, like let's say upper body day, you will always start with a sweater or a long sleeve on.
Pump covered.
That's like that. Ask yourself that. If you have that, then most likely you struggle with some sort of body dysmorphia going into the gym until you have a pump. Because it's been fucking 90 degrees outside and I still will go to the gym with a sweater until I feel like I'm warmed up enough and I have a pump.
I agree. I don't think I do it intentionally anymore, but I definitely do it for sure. Because I find that when I'm just getting dressed for the gym, I put on a tank top and then automatically I put another shirt over it. I'm not sure if it's because in my head I'm just like, yeah, like, you can't just wear tank tops like to and from. This isn't Walmart, you know what I mean? And so I know exactly what you mean though, because it's like that feeling when you switch gyms and you start at a new gym and you're like trying to figure out where on the hierarchy of gorillas you live. You know what I mean? like all right, he's the silverback. You know, like I'm somewhere down here. Like, I'm not a spider monkey, but I'm also not an orangutan. Like where am I in this like primate hierarchy? And it's funny that you mentioned the pump covers, because I mean, I am not I'm not the smallest dude in my gym anymore. And I still find myself doing the same thing, even though, you know, it's not super uncommon for someone to approach me at this point, you know, which is awesome. Biggest like thing you can say to some natty dude is, hey, what's your cycle like? You know, and which has only ever happened once, but it, you know, still makes me glow to this day. And I think it's just, you know, you bring up a really, really good point. The whole idea of, if you feel like at any point you need to hide your body because it doesn't look the way it did at any given point in time, I mean, I find that when I'm farther into a surplus, when I'm personally like exhuming a ton of heat, you know, like putting off heat, I'm wearing long sleeve shirts. You know what I mean? Because like I fill out long sleeve shirts when I'm massing. But when I'm dieting and I'm cold, I'm wearing a tank top. Like, how does that make any sense, you know?
Yeah. So that's just something like I've noticed that a lot of people will do, you know. But I would like, I would throw out an estimate that I would say like 8 out of 10 people, like 8 out of 10, if we're just classifying, males, like probably 8 out of 10. Like if you're going to go up to someone in the gym, like it's all going, that body dysmorphia is all going to look different on someone else, but it's all going to be like, it could all be classified as body dysmorphia at one point. Like, when you look in the mirror, and I've talked to some other people, I think to you about this too, Stephen, is like, I look back at photos of when I first started. Okay. And if you compare those photos to when you first started and where you're at now, you're like, wow, that's huge. Like massive changes, whatever. I would hope massive changes, unless you've been fucking around.
Yeah.
But massive changes usually. And then you like look in the mirror and you're like, wow, I feel like I still look like that person like from 7 years ago, in your own eyes. But when people from the outside look at you, especially if they haven't seen you for, that amount of time, they're like, wow, you look way different. But mentally, you're like, I still look the same as I did in those photos from like years ago. Mm-hmm. It's a real twisted, like mind screwing topic to like actually try to process.
How do you feel like we can get better about handling it? Because I know like some things that have worked for me is like I don't think would work for everyone else. I found that for me, I'm very analytical, and if I can see that I'm getting stronger in certain lifts, like for reps or for 1 rep maxes, I'm comfortable being as fat as it takes. Luckily, I'm one of those people who stores fat very favorably. And like even at 230, I still had a semblance of a 6-pack because it all just hangs out in my ass, which is like pretty cool for filling out some denim, but it's not as cool when you're like, like I have the fat holding patterns of the average white woman, which is like it's in my my boobs and in my ass, but hey, it makes me look good in clothing. And then when I take my shirt off, it doesn't make me look that bad. But have you found a strategy that works best for you? Do you find that like looking back on pictures makes it better or worse? Because you seem like you're like, I still feel like that person, even though objectively you're not.
Yeah. So like you mentioned, I think it's really good. And this is kind of like a learning curve almost, of where you go through the stage of where you become so hyper focused on how you look, and then stuff starts to change. But like you mentioned, you kind of focus now on how you're performing on lifts and stuff. Am I getting stronger on XYZ? And that's what I've done more recently in the past couple of years too, is I look at those type of factors now. Like, am I improving in the gym? Because if I know, like, if I'm improving in the gym, then most likely, and I would assume that body composition is also changing along the way too. If for months and months, like my lifts were going down and stuff like that, then I would be a little concerned that, okay, maybe what I'm doing right now is not working. And then it's kind of like going back to that hyper focus on how I'm looking too. But pulling an outside focus and making that your main focus, like you said, with the lifts and improving in the gym in terms of that aspect, that's something that I feel like a lot of people could benefit from.
Perfect. I totally agree. I've heard it from a lot of the top coaches that mentality switch from when you're dieting, you focus slightly less on the logbook and a little bit more on the mirror and the changes you see there, because you're just trying to hyper focus on the things you can improve, right? We're not trying to spend our energy and our self-worth on things that we can't control, I guess. And so when you're getting leaner, like I'm not going to be able to bench as much at 190 pounds as I can at 230. Like it just doesn't make sense, that I can bench the same amount. But objectively, I look a lot better, quote unquote, at that body weight, at least a panel of judges would say so. Mm-hmm. So it's like maybe trying to align your thought process with the way, just in line with what your current goal is probably the best way to go about it. So in the off season, you're taking a close look at your logbook. And for anyone who's listening to this and does not track their training, what are you doing? Get a logbook. I used to just go to the dollar store, which was right next to our old gym, and just buy a notebook. It doesn't have to be fancy. I spent $1 on my first logbook, and it lasted me almost a full year. You do not need to spend a ton of money on apps or anything. You can buy a program from me. That would do me a favor, but you don't have to do that. You can just go start tracking what you're doing in the gym and just get better at it. And having that there to hold you accountable, for me, it makes it a lot easier for me to be comfortable gaining body weight, specifically body fat, because I'm like, okay, I gained 4 pounds in the last 2 months and I don't look better. But I did see that my bent over row went from 155 for a set of 10 to 175 for a set of 10 at the same reps in reserve, same RPE. I got bigger. There's there's no doubt about it. I put on some muscle mass, or at least some neurological factor that allowed me to do that. And I got better. And therefore I know that at least some of that 4 pounds or however much you put on was muscle mass. And for me, that allows me to be more accepting of the body fat I put on. And then when I look at myself in the mirror, I don't see this fat, like whatever. I don't see it that way. I see it as, look at the progress I'm making.
Mm-hmm.
I see, like, when I lose the lines in my delts because my shoulders have finally gotten fluffy, I'm like, when I come down again, they're going to be popping. You know what I mean? Does that happen for you?
Yeah, and it's an interesting point that you bring up too with the logbook. Not a lot of people track in the gym, so they don't have that ability to focus on that type of aspect because they're just going in the gym winging it every time. What I do last week, I think 225. Fuck it, just throw on 245, whatever. Instead of like looking at their book and be like, I did do 225, but it was a struggle. So maybe it's like you're going to stay at that weight or you're going to drop down the weight. But now you have that ability to look back at what you were doing the week prior or weeks way in the past too. So it kind of brings that focus off of just so much on what do I look like, but this is actually the long-term process and the focus of kind of just improving in terms of weight lifted, the amount of volume that you can handle, and so forth.
What do you think is a good? So there's a little bit of a back and forth between a few of the people in the scientific corner of the industry, arguing a little bit about rate of weight gain. You see some of the guys like the 3DMJ guys are like, just get to a pretty decent body composition, aka 15% ish, and then potentially just stay in a very moderate surplus. Like we're talking 1 to 2 pounds of gain a month, like very, very slow, which to their credit, over a year, that's 12 to 24 pounds of gain. And these are generally for intermediate to advanced lifters. But then you see, a little bit of the other side of the coin, people arguing for a little bit more of a robust rate of gain. I think I probably lean on that side too, just because what I've personally found is more enjoyable for me, and I tend to diet really easy. So where do you kind of fall on that spectrum? What do you think is an appropriate weight of gain? And keeping in mind that at that higher rates of gain, you can have more struggle with body dysmorphia.
I think I fall with you on the same area of going a little bit quicker. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Steve Paul does about is it 1% to 1.5% a month?
Yeah. It's in that upper range, not pushing the full, like, some people are like 1.5% to 2% of body weight per month. So for example, for everyone listening, for me, I'm 220 right now. So that would be, 4 to 5 pounds a month of gain, which would be quite a lot for me.
And I believe like 3DMJ, like they base it off if you're a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. But for like advanced, which I would consider myself advanced, I think it's as low as like 0.25%, which when you really sit down and calculate that, that's only like, it's so little. And to measure it at that accuracy, you have to be on top of your shit so much, not only in terms of training and tracking your body weight, but specifically of your nutrition at that point too. And I feel like at that point of trying to nail 0.25% or even 0.5% of your total body weight per month, it's so small, especially if you've been doing this for a little bit longer. It's almost, I feel like it could possibly lead to burnout, especially if you're going into a contest prep after that, because most likely you're tracking your shit so closely if you're trying to aim for that 0.25 to 0.5% per month.
I totally agree. I think once you get to those, once you get to those low levels of weight gain, like you said, like 0.25%. So for me, that would be a pound a month. I wake up 2 or 3 pounds in either direction every morning. You know, like this morning, for example, I stepped on my scale. I was 219.9. Yesterday, I stepped on my scale at 223.7. You know, it's like how can you track that small of a change and know that it's not just like a change? If you just started eating more fiber, right? You just decided that daily I'm going to get an extra 5 grams of fiber. Just the amount of water content and food volume that you're just going to be storing, that could change a pound in a month. And then you don't know if you actually put on a pound of body weight. I think that when you're even at the, although I do agree that it should level out at the higher ends of training advancement. So like if you're, you know, a late stage intermediate, early advanced, like you probably should not be pushing weight gain at 2% a month. That's probably excessive. But like I said, if you go way to the bottom end of that range, you run the risk of not being able to accurately assess if you are gaining weight. And if you're not in a surplus, obviously you can gain muscle mass at maintenance, but it's just not as robust. Mm-hmm. Right? So we want to make sure that we are in a surplus so that we can actually make the progress. So running the risk of not making progress for me is not worth it when all I would have to do is add another 2 weeks to my diet to lose the fat that I would have gained if I just went at the faster rate. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think like everything you stated. And plus too, another factor that I look at is if I'm getting stronger in the gym on my lifts, then it's another tool that I can be like, okay, I am headed in the right direction of, being in that slower plus and everything. But like you said, if I'm gaining like 4 pounds, 5 pounds, a month, I'm like, this is not a massing phase. This is dirty bulking.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, 100%.
I think that it's funny. I think that almost within reason, let me say that before I say this, but almost all rates of weight of gain and loss are almost acceptable given the context, because if you're looking at something like a mini cut, right, when you're intentionally going to a very sharp deficit very quickly because you're at the higher end of your body fat. For those that don't know, a mini cut is an intentionally short, very hardcore dieting phase where your intention is to cut as much body fat as possible in the shortest amount of time in order to potentiate more massing. So it is not used to get you stage shredded. It's normally like a 3 to 6 week cutting phase where you're looking to lose 1 to 2 pounds of body fat per week, which, 1 being, not super aggressive, 2+ pounds of body fat per week is that's reasonably aggressive. And I think that, in the same context of cutting, when you're in a higher surplus. Generally speaking, you should probably be in a higher surplus at a lower body fat percentage. That's my take. So if to almost bring it full circle, when you first get out of a contest prep, you should probably be in a little bit of a higher surplus in order to potentiate recovery and get back into that healthy body fat range, rather than do a very small surplus and mitigate fat gain. We already know we're going to gain fat. That's the whole fucking point. We can't live our life at 4% body fat. I mean, dude, my dick doesn't work. It's like, I want to get back to living the most pseudo-normal life I can as fast as possible. And so at that point, it makes sense to be going for, a 2% increase in body weight per month or more, because those first 10 to 15 pounds coming back for me, like if I gained 10 to 15 pounds in the first 3 weeks after a show, that's not that outrageous. That doesn't pull me even above 10% body fat for someone my weight. So you hear people who are like, I'm within 5 pounds of my stage weight and I feel great. Bullshit. You just don't know what feels good anymore. You know what I mean?
Or they weren't lean enough when they stepped on stage.
Yeah, that is also very true. Very, very true. Yeah. Excuse my water sip. It was poorly timed. Cool. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. We've been going for about an hour. Do you have any other topics that you want to address along kind of this weird continuum that we've gone down about contest preps and body dysmorphia and just nutrition in general?
It's not nutrition in general, but unless you want to dive into kind of some general nutrition recommendations, but something that I thought about while we were discussing here, and I remember you brought this up, and is lifting to a different type of music too. So it's kind of funny. I was thinking about this when I was at the gym the other day, as I was listening to I'm a big EDM, rap style person. And I know we had this discussion when we lifted in Helena, but I often find myself when I listen to that type of music that it amps you up, like it gets you excited for the gym. But also at the same time, I lose that ability to focus on a couple key aspects of how's my form? Am I utilizing a full range of motion? Do I feel like I'm going through the process too quickly? So that's a question for you too, is do you feel like when you lift to different type of music, I know you're a big Mozart person,
yeah, Vivaldi, Mozart, Bach. Yeah.
Do you feel like your lifts, do you feel like your gym performance is different? Because if I was to ask, a couple years ago, oh yeah, I lift to Mozart or just some instrument, instruments.
That's weird.
Yeah, but now it's really grown on me especially on days where I feel like I struggle to find my groove in the gym.
Yeah, it's funny you bring this up, because I was this is the last week of my mesocycle, and I have my hard leg session today. This is my highest volume leg session of the week is today, and I find that I can start with the music that I typically think of as my gym music, right? So like you, I enjoy rap. I haven't gotten into EDM, but I'm a big metalhead. So we both like bangers. That's what we can agree on, right? We like bangers. But at the same time, I call it overstimulated. I don't know if it's just a combination of the weight that I'm pushing, the intensity I'm pushing, the brightness of the gym, the loudness of the music, and potentially a decent amount of caffeine at this point too, if I just get overstimulated. And I find that when that happens, if I'm starting to feel a little almost burnt out, that putting on classical music, and it almost has to be classical music for me. I don't know why. I've tried instrumental guitar and stuff like that. It has to be the music I was listening to when I was in a crib for whatever reason. And it it brings me this sense of calm and focus that I just rarely get when I'm in the gym. And I think like anything else, it has its like time and place. And I always find that if I get to that point where I'm starting to almost, do you ever get into a lifting session that is so hard you're getting like a mini panic buildup, like
Mhm.
you're like freaking out a little bit?
Yeah.
On the last week of the mezzo, I always get that way. And I find that I can basically listen to my routine music for about, the first 45 minutes of my training session before I start feeling overstimulated. And then I put on, Chopin or Vivaldi, and I calm right down. And not only do I calm down, but I feel like I just took a nootropic or something because I can focus. And all of a sudden I'm getting like better mind muscle connection. My form improves just because there's no longer this massive hit of adrenaline that's coming through my headphones. Like no one's screaming in my ear, which I like when I'm trying to, hit a PR on leg press or hack squat or, whatever. But it can be too much when I'm trying to do standing calf raises. You know what I mean? And it's like, it almost seems like there is a time and a place for those types of stimuli. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's where it goes back to I've had to switch like mid workouts just because I feel like I can't focus. Like because there's so much like from, the caffeine, from just the gym environment in general, the people that are in there. And then I have this music coming in and it's like so it's like I'm like, I get amped up, my heart rate's higher than it probably would, should be. And I just feel like I don't execute reps as good as they could be if I was like more calm and collected. And like you said, developing that mind to muscle connection through having, that different type of music. So, such as Mozart or something like the Interstellar playlist I've listened to through. It's a different type of stimulus. So what I challenge people out there is like, if you struggle with that, like as funny as it sounds, like just try it. Like you never know, one lifter that is like, I see that's like no emotion during his lifts at all is, it's the Natty Professor on Instagram, Ensima.
Yeah, I follow him. I was trying to.
But like when he deadlifts, like, and even any type of lift, like his facial expression stays the same. Like he does not like scream. He does not yell. He doesn't curse. He goes up to the barbell, lifts it, puts it down, and that's it. So it's like when I feel like if I'm in that state of mind, it's like I'm there to do work, and when I'm there to do work, I want to make sure I'm doing the best work I can,
Yeah, for sure. I think that brings in a really interesting topic. We all know there is a difference between like working hard and working with intent, right? And I think that, too much stimulus and too much like, sympathetic drive can alter how hard I perceive things to be, if that makes sense. When I go into a set like cool, calm, and collected, and this will often happen when I'm training with someone else because I'll often forget to play my music or I just won't have my headphones in. I find that I am much more capable of a perfect execution on every single rep every single time because I'm there's no emotion anymore. It's just focus. I'm just lifting with intent, right? So I wonder if, there was some way to look at, like you always hear about these studies where they're trying to get people to go to failure, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And they're using the researchers are like actively like yelling like and screaming at the participants to try go harder, more, one more, you keep going, you know, because they're trying to get them to get to their true failure. True failure. And I wonder if that's something that's needed for novices and people who, you know, are not truly in tune with how hard an actual like 3 rep in reserve or 2 rep in reserve set should be, you know, because like most people when they say, oh, I train every set to failure, it's like, no, you actually train like a 3 RIR. Sorry, dude. You know, like,
yeah,
you know, like I just wonder if, you know, there's a level that you get to where all of a sudden you don't need this external stimuli to help you anymore, or maybe it's even a hindrance at a point. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you bring up that the beginners like training, I think probably what they feel mostly is like, you know, oh my God, my legs are burning. Like, you know, that's what and then they just hyper focus on that. And they think, oh my God, like I can't go anymore because, you know, their legs are on fire or anything like that. And I've even caught myself in the gym too, of like, am I really training to 2 reps in reserve? Like, am I actually truly training there? And it's funny because, and this might happen to you too, is that as you progress through a meso, sometimes from what I thought was a 3 rep in reserve, and then I go into like, by the time I get to week 3, it's almost like I'm doing more reps, like almost 5 to 6 more reps sometimes than I was in that first week, just because I now like I'm very familiar with the movement at that point, and I'm more familiar with how much further I can actually push it to truly get to like a 2 rep in reserve, or, you know, once I get to that 1 rep in reserve of where I'm actually at on that scale.
Gotcha. I think that, you know, that's another thing that makes logging your training so fucking important, is you would have had no idea how you can't know how hard you're training if you have nothing to compare it to, right? You know, I don't care who you are, you can't work hard all the time, right? You can't work at I don't know a single person who could survive like a Dr. Mike Jared Feather last week of the mesocycle indefinitely. Like you can't. Like it is completely above and beyond anything you can survive, which is why it's only 1 week and then you take time off, right? And without having access to your logbook, you don't even know how hard you're actually working, right? I think when people say they train high volume, high intensity, right? You know, they push everything to failure, but they're also training high volume. They're probably just perpetually staying in that state of overtraining, right? They're just kind of perpetually in that state. And then eventually something gives and they take a week off. They see some gains because all of a sudden they've had a rest period, and then they come back and they do it again. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just think that, like you said, like for example, that first week of the mesocycle on the leg press, you're like, that was a hard set. I felt that set. That shit was hard. And then the next week you come back and you beat that set by 2 reps, and you're like, well, that was also hard, but it wasn't as hard as the set I did last week. And then 1 more week goes by, and you know what you said was an RIR 3 on week 1. You're now saying is an RIR 1 on week 3, but you've moved up like 6 or 7 reps. And I think that, kind of like what we were talking about with the whole like sympathetic drive, sometimes we don't really realize what we're capable of until we push there, right? Which is why you need to effectively push hard at certain times. Sorry, that thought process was just all over the place.
No, but it's true. It's just, it's kind of, I'm just going to add this on because I feel like we're kind of off topic, but
we're down the rabbit hole anyway. Just keep it going.
It's like beginners when you go into the gym, and I'm very observant of people, and I see people train with probably no clue with how they're actually structuring their program. You know, they'll be like, oh, I'm going to do like, it's funny because at the gym here, I was standing next to these high school kids and they're like, yeah, the three of them. And they said, yeah, we're going to do 5 sets of 10 on this like bicep curl. And then we're going into 6 sets of tricep extensions, and it's like, fuck, like I don't even get to like 5 sets for me is like, I know where I stand with my volume now. And like to get to 5 sets. And if you're truly training to like, 1 rep in reserve in those final weeks of a meso, like that will fuck you up like hardcore. So I feel like most beginners, when they start training, either it's like they train with so much volume, like they have no clue of what they're actually at because they could be going in there and hitting the same thing 3 times a week, which is totally fine. But the amount of volume that they're doing on each of those 3 days for that specific body part is like, could be super high. Then at the same time, maybe they're not training hard enough too. So they have all of that volume. It could be junk volume where they're just doing it to go through the motion. But all of it, maybe 50 or 60% of it isn't actually doing anything beneficial for them, And then the third one, it's like, okay, well, how can we fix that? Is they're not tracking, so they have no clue. You'd be hitting one body, legs once a week, or if you're lucky every 2 weeks, and then upper body's like every single day at that point.
Yeah. I think you bring up a really, really good point. Is how hard and how infrequent do beginners actually need to train? We know it basically the answer is something, right? You need to push decently hard for some amount of work and you will get a rainbow pot of gold level of gains at being at that intermediate level. And that's good and fine for about 6 months, maybe a year if you're lucky, but then you hit that wall where, anyone who's been lifting for any amount of time longer than a year knows the plateau. And you hit so many plateaus in your training career that some people just never get past them. Do you know what I mean? Like, yep. There's that initial benchmark when you become an intermediate lifter where all of a sudden, okay, something has to change. I have to put in the smallest amount of thought into my process. But most people never make it out of intermediate. Mm-hmm. Most people are indefinitely an early intermediate lifter for the rest of their life, because once you get about halfway through your intermediate gains, you hit another plateau. And then that's when you start after thinking about, okay, how can I break up this volume? What intensities do I need to be working at so I can increase volume or decrease volume? What movements work best to me? What has the best stimulus to fatigue ratio? What's my diet look like? All of a sudden, the farther along your lifting lifespan you get, the more of these factors start to matter. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sorry, go.
It's interesting too, because you'll see people where they train, let's say it's legs, and I've seen someone they go from leg press to hack squat to leg extensions. Then they do like a front or back squat.
And then they lunge to burn out.
Then they do lunges, and then they'll maybe do another machine. So it's like, holy shit, people, are you doing like 6 freaking different leg, 6 or 7 different leg exercises? And it's like, I'm watching them too. And it's like watching and observing. And I'm never like, I don't say that in like a judgmental way at all. It's just, I'm very observant in the gym, but they're going to what seems like close to their failure on certain exercises. And they will go to failure on some because they, especially on squat or whatever. And it's just, I ask myself, it's like, do those people realize, or are they understanding of like what they're doing is not benefiting them at all? And I want to go up to those people so much and just be like, just cut half of that junk out and focus on these exercises of just slowly progressing your volume over time. And that's training. If you're doing it correctly, training is boring as fuck. It's not exciting. Like, you're doing a lot of the same exercises for an extended period of time.
For
Like
years.
you're not doing the swipe workouts of, a different exercise or a different, routine every week. Exercise and training is and should be boring if you're doing it correctly.
If you're doing it for like competitive or maximal hypertrophy, right? Because like you said, like I think exercise and training are two different things. That's why I stopped saying I'm going to the gym. I'm going to train is what I say,
I
because
like that.
it mentally for me it makes a difference.
Yes.
If I say I'm going to the gym, in my mind that's like, well, the gym has fucking monkey bars. Am I gonna do that? No. You know what I mean? But like I'm going to train means like I'm going to do this with a purpose. Athletes train, right? If you want to be good at something, you want to be good at a sport, quote unquote, that's a different argument. But if you want to be good at something, you got to become an athlete. You got to become a student of that sport, right? And there's no more just like going to the gym and doing fuck all, because at a point it's just not going to be proficient anymore. Just having that mentality of I'm going here to do this work regardless if it's repetitive, regardless if it's like fun. Like, do I have training days that are fun? Absolutely. Do I like my training? Yes, most of the time. Are there times where I'm like, ugh, leg press again? Yeah, there are also those times, and that's when maybe I switch it up and I put in an exercise that I get excited about. Right now I programmed in some squat singles because my training was getting a little stale and I wasn't looking forward to it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to sit here and pretend that squat singles are good for me for hypertrophy training? Absolutely the fuck not. But I needed something that got me excited to go back and train. So I programmed in my big three again. And, it did its job for like the first 3 weeks of this mesocycle. I was like, fuck yeah, I get to go like hit a sub max on squat. I got to squat 405 again the other day, pain free for the first time in over a year now. And like that felt amazing. But is it going to get me to my long-term goal of like earning a pro card? No. Like one rep maxes, like, surprise if you didn't know this already, do not give you much in terms of hypertrophy. They give you a lot of fatigue, a lot of knee pain. They don't give you much for hypertrophy. So I think reframing what someone's goal is, and I think that's inevitably what it comes down to. If your goal is to be as best as you can possibly be at X, then you have to realize that there are specific things that you need to do every single day to get you there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you personally like write down like big goals that you have or anything like that?
I haven't for a while. It was something, so that was something that I wanted to start this year, and I have done. But I think it's really good that people do that. I will add, though, I think people become hyper focused on having an outcome goal.
Sort of a
For
process.
example, yeah. So, for example, of let's say I want to lose 25 pounds. Awesome. Okay. How are you going to get to that goal? What behaviors and habits are going to get you to that goal? So, and I have some of my clients do this too, is where they'll develop, we have an outcome-based goal at the very top, but then I say, okay, great. What are we going to focus on in week 1 and 2, habit and behavior wise? That's going to help you get to that outcome goal. Great. Week 1 and 2, you accomplish that. Moving on to week 3 and 4, that month, what other behavior and habit goal are we going to focus on that can get you towards that outcome goal? So it's almost like you're taking the focus away of so much focus on having that outcome at the very top that it almost becomes, without them noticing, that they're already striving and they're already reaching that outcome-based goal just through changing behaviors and habits. So for a beginner, that may just look like tracking your food, going to the gym the 3 to 4 times a week. Those behavior changes right off the bat, that's going to get those people a lot closer to that outcome goal versus saying, well, I'm just going to do all this time. I'm just going to do a lot of cardio. I'm just going to run. I'm just going to like not eat a lot of food, which is all dandy. Like it might get them to that outcome goal, but then after they reach that outcome goal, there is really no sustainability in the behaviors and habits that they created along the way.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree. I think there's a huge difference between something you hear a lot is, trust the process, be involved in the process, love the process, right? And I think that's a wonderful thing, but you can only love the process if you know where the process is going, right? So I think having a having a goal, but whether or not it's specific, whether or not it's lose 20 pounds or, I want to be Mr. Olympia, that's not really what I'm referring to, but having some sort of overarching theme where, like you said, you can say, all right, on week 1, I need to change this in order to get here, right? It's a habit. It's something that you can physically implement time and time again. So, for me personally, I do write down my goals, and like I have, two primary goals right now. I have get my master or get into a grad program that I'm applying for here at University of Montana, and then earn a pro card. And those are my two goals. And what's funny is I write those two goals down every single day when I wake up in the morning. When I wake up in the morning, this is my notebook. I bring it everywhere. I write down like the homework assignments I have to do. I write down the household chores I have to do. And I find that just by having my goals in there and then one little tagline I write under it with a little checkbox is, did you do something today that'll help you reach those goals? And it's a yes or no check mark. Like I wrote this out by hand. I write it out by hand every day. And at the end of the day, I have to sit down and look at that. Did I do something that's going to help me get into grad school? Yes. Did I do something that's going to help me earn a pro card? Yes. For me, those things do not have to look the same to everybody, right? For, some person, it might be not a tangible goal. Maybe it's like something more metaphysical, like I want to be a good person, right? Just something big and extraordinary, right? So how can you do something every single day that's going to guarantee you're a good person? Well, what if one of your goals was, ask one person today, I don't know how their day is going.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tangible thing that you can do every day that is going to guarantee you are a better person tomorrow than you were today, is just by going out of your way to inquire about someone's day. For all you know, they could be having the worst day they've ever had in their entire life, and just you taking the 2 minutes to care, the checkout line at Target, might turn their whole day around,
Yeah.
and I think it's so key to have some sort of goal, because I think the second you don't have anything that you're aspiring to, it takes a lot. It's like, how do you have a reason to wake up in the morning? Do you know what I mean? Like if you don't have something you're striving for.
Yeah. And especially like if someone doesn't know where to start, even it's, so take a step back and be like, okay, what is the low hanging fruit? So the low hanging fruit being like, what is something that if you set a goal, like 100%, like you can do that. Okay. So that may, for someone that doesn't even exercise, and when I mean exercise, I'm saying like doesn't even walk, like they don't plan any walking or anything, like low hanging fruit for them may be a goal of just walking 5 to 10 minutes 3 times a week, which when you pull that into like one of us, you're like, oh, that's super easy. Like, but for that person, that is still an obtainable goal that they can easily grab, So maybe they start out doing that 3 times a week and then they start crossing that off. And I always tell people, have a calendar or something where you visually see those check marks, because it's going to motivate the person, and then the next week they continue to build off of that goal. And now before you know it, this person has the behavior change and the habit where they can consistently walk an hour, 4 times a week. And it all started just from starting with 5 minutes 3 times a week or whatever.
Hmm. I think what you said about the check marks thing, like that touched me to my core, because every morning I wake up and I write down 2 things I have already done. You know, I say I have like something like wake up and eat breakfast as the first 2 things on my thing. Something I've literally never not done in my entire life. You know what I mean? Because having that, like you said, like super low hanging fruit, having the 2 things that are, maybe they're, slightly out of your normal daily routine, but they're so close, they're just right there,
Mm-hmm.
having those 2 things and getting that under your hand, it's like an immediate win, and I think that people who get that little, dopamine hit every time they get just a little thing checked off on their box, it's much more likely for them to want to continue that trend of doing something that, helps them every single day. Even if it's something small, like you said, a 5 to 10 minute walk 3 times a week, like like you see shows like My 600 Pound Life, which I binged watched like 10 episodes of last week. And it's funny how far removed I am from this problem too, because like when I'm like, oh, I'm getting fat, it's like because my abs went away for my peak month of bulking,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like these people are literally like housebound because they can't walk, and it kind of puts your problems into perspective a little bit. But something that you said, that you know like achieving the low hanging fruit, like something that a lot of these people do is like they just like start like getting their own food, or like they're
Exactly.
like I just like I don't order out anymore. I just cook everything. But they're still cooking like, stuff that I would be like, yeah, it's probably not the best idea. But to them it's, it's slowly moving towards that target goal that you were talking about, just
Yeah.
the low hanging fruit, I think is so important.
And I know I mentioned this in the very beginning, but imperfect action beats standing still. So a lot of these people they're waiting for the perfect moment to start. And that moment's never going to come because they're always going to say, well, this isn't right, or this, this is happening. And it's like, just start. Who cares? Like maybe you're not able to do it 3 times a week, but maybe you're doing it once a week. That's still better than doing it like doing nothing.
100%. You see that same dichotomy, that paralysis by analysis in the lifting community too, like especially in the natural scientific niche of bodybuilding, where some of us are so hyper focused on trying to make everything absolutely as perfect as possible, that sometimes we forget that like the most important thing is just show up,
Yeah.
just start, just do, and if you never start something, you're not you have to take a step to get closer to where you want to go, right? like like you said, you know just just take that first step, grab the low hanging fruit. It doesn't have to be difficult.
100%.
Gotcha. Cool, man. Well, should we wrap it up there?
I think we discussed a lot today.
Yeah, that was a interesting journey of conversation. That's why I don't like scripting these kinds of things, because we never would have gone down that like weird loophole of classical music that led us to goal setting. I think scripted podcasts are whack. So anyone listening, this is not scripted. As I'm sure you can tell. Yeah, Hunter, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and doing this. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. Where can people reach out to you if they want to know more about you? He is a registered dietitian. So if you need help with your diet, this is the man to do it. This is your man's. So where can they find you?
So obviously on Instagram quite a bit. So it's just Hunter_Pauley, Pauley. And then I also have a website as well, but just my name, hunterpauley.com. And that's basically it. Yeah, I'm kind of a low key guy.
So, one last thing before we officially sign off. There has been a rumor that there might be a HP Fitness podcast coming out here. Is that happening?
Yes, hopefully have my first guest this weekend, and the goal with that is to do some sort of podcast twice a month. So hopefully every 2 weeks.
Awesome. Is that going to be more fitness related content? Is it going to be more nutrition focused? Is it just going to be a broad range?
Broad range, but it will be fitness, nutrition, and then I also have the lifestyle aspect in there too, to kind of just bring on a wide variety of guests. Because I think if we start to hyper focus on just fitness and nutrition, we're kind of leaving out another variable or valuable aspect of fitness and nutrition. So kind of that mental and aspect and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Well, man, that sounds awesome. I'm super looking forward to being able to listen, and maybe even I'll be a guest at some point. Who knows?
I think you might.
Anyway, thank you so much again. Thank you everyone who listened in this week. I really appreciate your support. And mask and class is out. The bell has rung, and we will see you next time. Oh God, I wasn't hovering over it for once.